Hey, what's up? Welcome back to Permission to Shine. It's your host, Andrew Namanny. You know what we do here. It's not your first time. We get to highlight the most inspiring, humble people from around the world. And today we have a remarkable individual named Daniel Dart. He is a solo founder of Rockyard Ventures, a venture capital fund. He has an MBA from MIT. He's got a few degrees from the London School of Economics. He's done economic work across the continent of Africa. He's managed bands. He's been in a band. This guy has an incredible story. Now, what if I told you he used to be in prison? He used to be homeless. And these are things that he has used to propel him towards success. It shows you the kind of work ethic and determination this man has and the lessons y'all are about to learn listening to today's episode. So buckle in. My buddy Chris McGowan called me the other day and he challenged me to not curse on the podcast. And I've got to say, we recorded this podcast before he gave me that challenge that I'm going to try to accept. So get ready for some F-bombs. Buckle up. If you've got kids in the car, maybe do this later. All right, guys, if you've enjoyed an episode of Permission to Shine, do me a favor. This is a costly endeavor. It takes a lot of time and effort to get studios, record these in person, to fly to New York City, track down these guests. Share this with somebody who will enjoy it, please. And if you've got feedback for me or a future suggestion, Andrew@permissiontoshine.org or on my website, permissiontoshine.org. Y'all, let's dive into this insane story of Daniel Dart.
When we first met, you gave me some really good advice. You were like, dude, know your superpower and just dominate in your superpower. Like double down on that over and over. And I'm curious like how you kind of came to feel that advice so deeply.
Oh man, I think people like to do what they're good at, right? So I think like if you're really bad at basketball, you probably don't like to play basketball. And people always say kind of find your passion and all these things. But when you're a kid, I think you're allowed to have like three passions. You either got to be like a singer, an actor, an athlete, because they don't really teach you anything else. And so I think a lot of times as we're growing up, we're all kind of pushed into those spaces, right? But then I think step back, like, hey, what are you good at? Are you good at networking? Are you good at like complex problem solving? Are you good at people managing? And I think when you actually step back and look at the function that you're good at and you kind of lean into that, this huge world opens up because it's applicable across industries. And so like a lot of that, it's like in context with you, there's a million things you could do. But I think like, hey, go towards what you're good at, because a lot of times that's what gives you energy. Right. And I think if you have too much anxiety, that means you're trying too much in things that just don't work. So you're like fearful all the time. If you're bored, you're trying stuff that just doesn't challenge you. And so you got to kind of find that thing. And I think you should be anxious, I don't know, maybe 50% of the time, because that means you're really kind of learning. But I think if you consistently put yourself out there, just like a lot of musicians, I'm like, they got to know that they're no good. But you can't say that, right? Because you've been taught to follow your passion.
Mm-hmm. Are you an anxious person?
I get about 50% of the time, you know what I mean? But I like to push myself like, and stretch myself out. Like, hey, what's like kind of the next challenge? What's those next challenge? Like what I really like is what they say, type 2 fun, you know, where it's like, it's not fun in the moment, but looking back on it, you're glad you did it.
Wait, I love that.
Yeah.
Type 2 fun. Go have some of that.
Type 2 fun. Yeah. I think I got it from like a Patagonia blog, even though I'm not a Patagonia guy.
Shout out.
Yeah. But it's like type 1 is stuff where it's like, hey, it's a carnival and like you go and it's fun. Type 2 fun is like a marathon where like it kind of sucks while you're doing it, but looking back, you're like, wow, I'm really happy I did that. Or maybe getting a college degree or something like that. And type 3 fun is what you think will be type 2 fun, but actually just sucks. You're like, actually, this shit was horrible. I don't want to do it again.
Yo, that resonates with me so hard. I love that, Daniel. Last night I was at the Russian and Turkish bathhouse. Have you ever heard of this place?
No.
Dude.
I mean, I made movies or something.
We gotta go.
I'm like,
bro, this place is in the East Village. It started in 1892. They've got 5 saunas and cold plunges. They got the Russian room. They crank it over 200 degrees. I don't know if you're like a sauna cold plunge guy at all.
Not really, man.
Okay, real quick. So I'm in this cold plunge. It's 39 degrees, which is one of the coldest plunges I've ever heard of. And I'm just sitting in it. And my mind wants to freak out, right? because it sucks.
Yeah.
Like my feet are numb, my whole body hurts. But I'm like, don't freak out because you know it's going to be fine. And afterwards, you're going to be like, that was the coolest thing ever.
And
That's type
how
2
long you
fun.
sitting there?
So I do 3 rounds. I go 15 minutes in the Russian room, which is psycho. And then I go 2 minutes in the cold plunge.
Okay.
Just enough to like get my body under
Yeah,
control.
that sounds like type 2 fun. I think going to the gym is like type 2 fun.
Yes, sir. I love that.
You know, they say the hardest part of going to the gym is just the drive there.
It's so true.
Yeah, or New York, the walk there.
Yep.
Yeah.
That's so true.
Yeah.
So your superpower, what is that?
Oh man, my superpower, I think being able to connect dots that other people don't see, I think is my superpower. So like where I try to lean in is how can I add as much value as possible to my network? And in doing so, get myself into rooms and opportunities that I probably wouldn't get into before. But a lot of times it's like adding value. Like I always say, the most important thing is, do they pick up your call? And if you add value, then they pick up your call. And so a lot of times, like, hey, how can I just help everyone? How can I make these connections? How can I do that? And then if you're always helping people, they want you around.
Do they pick up your call?
That's the goal.
Mm-hmm.
Right. And I think a lot of times people, so I think there's like a big thing just in my generation, our generation, I would say currently, it's like a big focus on me, right? Like if things are hard, I need to focus on self. If, you know, if I'm depressed, like I need to look inward. I need to do that. And I disagree like fully. I think like when shit's bad, like go help someone. I always like tell people like, man, take the cash on your table, go put that into $21 bills and go hand it out to people. And like you'll feel so good. Like there's so much energy in helping other people. And so I work in venture capital, I work early stage. My goal is to help my companies. The way I try to connect dots with everyone is like I'm trying to help everybody. And in doing so, you end up getting reciprocation, right? It just happens because like I always think like in my father once said like people want to help people. Like if you're looking for directions, people will go out of their way to tell you. I think the problem is it becomes too extractive, right? And I think that there's like kind of this shift. It's like sometimes I'll be on like Instagram or something, and like every picture is like of themselves. I'm like, damn, like you're like narcissistic as fuck. Like this is crazy. And I think that like it's just me, 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 me. And I think that that doesn't lead to satisfaction. And eventually it does lead to depression because that's just not like we're communal for millions of years. We fought tigers and shit. You know what I'm saying? Like we didn't really have guns or any of that shit till relatively recently. You know what I mean? And so I think by helping people, that's like giving back to your community. And that's like that I think I hope is my superpower.
I love that, man. You're a special person. Thank you for
Well,
going
thank
there.
you, man.
Yeah, 100%. And I like your advice of being like, when it's easiest to stay at home on your couch because you're just sulking and you're suffering and you're like, poor me, that's the most important time to just like kind of smack yourself in the face and go do for others. That to me
Absolutely.
is the lesson there.
I would say more good things have happened to me in my life because I helped others than anything else. And it's not even close.
Can you give an example? Is there anything that comes to mind?
Oh man, everything. Like I do a ton of work in criminal justice. I do a ton of work in housing. You know, I feel like I've become a good close confidant to many people, both significantly my senior and significantly my junior. Like there's people who are like some of my investing heroes that like hit me up like, "Hey man, I would love for you to help me learn how to make corporate partnerships." And I'm like, "Motherfucker, you're famous as shit." Like yeah. And all of those different things, but like what I want is I want to be the person if you're in a jam that you call, right? I want to be like that kind of fixer support system. I want to be like someone you could rely on, someone whose word means something.
Mm-hmm. How'd you get into venture capital?
I got into venture capital. One, I kind of always wanted to be in it once I learned it, but I think the asset class is just brilliant because of the power law, right? Like things can 1000x, things can do that. You could influence outcomes. And I also love the fact that the founders oftentimes retain the equity and the control, and the majority of the equity control stays within the community. So like if you look at just a wealth generation tool, I don't think anything in history is better. And if you look going back into like a lot of the capital bases and stuff like that, like a majority of that shit was not earned. And to think that like this idea of meritocracy and stuff at a macro level exists, and I understand on a microcosm it does, right? But like I always talk about it, like, and I'm a white guy, right? So it's like if you look at finance, it's run by white guys, right? Like, but then we talk about meritocracy, like basketball is a meritocracy. Like LeBron James is objectively better than me. 99% of other shit is subjective, right? And so I think like the thing I love about venture capital, even though we have to improve it, I think it is more meritocratic than other asset classes. Like there's so many people that just have like inherited wealth or amassed wealth or like, it's like I saw this bit the other day about the king and queen of England. We still got kings and queens. Like, fuck them dudes. You know what I'm saying? Like, I think that shit's crazy.
Mm-hmm.
And so the idea that, the banks or these type of things are like for the people or that, like, I'm not saying I'm inherently against them. I understand their need, but I also don't think the incentives align to create new generational wealth. And I think venture capital can do that.
I love that.
Right. And I'm an outsider coming in, right? I'm formerly incarcerated dude, was homeless, doing the
We got a
fucking
lot to
thing.
get to, Daniel.
Yeah,
Dart.
I'm just saying, like, for me to
He
come
dropped
in,
the bombs.
yeah, like the VC's the back door. And like I'm here and I want to fuck shit up.
Yes, sir.
Yeah.
Well, you're doing it, man. Can you share how much you've raised?
I can't really share.
Come on, man.
I can't share some of the stuff, man. Get me busted, man.
Oh my gosh.
But I'll just say, so I run a fund called Rockyard Ventures, and we have raised, we are deploying, and so if you list this and within our scope, hit me up.
Yes,
We'll
sir.
invest in you.
Okay, we got a lot to unpack because you just opened Pandora's box
Yeah.
there. Don't look at my loafers with no socks because you already
Just saying,
you
man.
already made fun
I'm
of
just
me.
saying, if
for
you're
it.
listening to this, let me paint the picture. I'm here right now, and Andrew is wearing loafers, no socks. I think I'm gonna start calling Maui Jim.
Wait, what does that mean? Maui Jim?
That's the thing. It's
That's
provocative.
sunglasses. What do you mean?
Is it sunglasses?
Yeah.
I thought it was like Hawaiian shirts.
That's true. That's true. It is.
What's the Hawaiian shirts?
I don't. Tommy Bahama.
Tommy Bahama, man.
Tommy Bahama.
I'm just saying.
My God.
Rolling around here like it's South Florida.
Well, check out the YouTube video.
Yeah.
You can see it for yourself. We're hagging. All right, Rockyard Ventures. What are you guys investing into?
So we invest in the United States in a pre-seed and seed stage startups.
Come on, man. Maybe people don't know what that means.
Okay,
Dumb that down real quick.
So we invest in tech companies at the earliest stage. So a lot of times the first institutional or second institutional capital that they raise. What that means in more tactical terms is valuations from 0 to roughly $20 million. And what I would say is industrial sector adjacent. And so think like construction, supply chain, manufacturing. And the way I kind of see it is like those blue collar kind of old legacy, old line industry sectors.
Okay.
Right. So for instance, like the software that ties together a transport management system or those type of things.
Okay. And what do you think makes a good investor?
I think an early stage, you could say like a proprietary or differentiated network, I think is the most. Like, can you see opportunities and insights that other people can't see? And so are you looking at a different picture than other people? So I think a lot of times, like having come from a different, unique background, like the image on the screen for me looks different than the image on the screen for a lot of people in venture, right? Like I would say stereotypically they grew up, went to a Target undergrad, went to a Target master's, worked in an investment bank. Like that's traditionally like what I think we see the most of, right? And so they have an image on their screen based on their life, right? Because like I think we're all a little bit Frankenstein, like we are made up by our experiences. And so when I come in, I'm looking at a completely different image, a completely different screen. So I'm seeing completely different opportunities. And a lot of that, like when I say blue collar sectors, like I think coming from a unique background, I'm able to connect with people in different industries that other people can't. And so I invest in construction, I invest in transportation, and I'm the only formerly incarcerated fund manager I've ever met in my life. Okay. But and a lot of times, like, that's a faux pas. They're like, "Oh my God," like, da, 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 da. But, like, if you go to construction sites and you go to ports, you go to docks, or you go to plumber shops, like, a lot of them have had run-ins with the justice system. So it's like I actually identify with what they're doing, who they are, that kind of community credibility, and so I think that that provides alpha. And so I think the thing about it is like I also lean into that. Like I want to work and invest and back and support and grow my people.
How do you define alpha?
Alpha is like anything above just what the S&P or something. Like if you were to just put money in bonds or whatever and it gives you 5%, like alpha's anything above that.
Additional value.
Yeah. Like what I'm saying is like if 10 of us are all investing, the alpha for me is like what can I get above you?
Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay, I love that. Dude, so many places to go here. For somebody who wants to kind of be able to paint their own unique picture and perspective, do you have any advice for them on how they can kind of go out there, right? You're saying like, hey, build a unique network, right? Build the unique insights. Like, are there tangible things our listeners can do?
I mean, for me, like I would say the energy thing we mentioned earlier is really important to me. Like I try to like see what gives me energy in those type 2 fun things. Like I think being involved in a lot of like different issues or nonprofits, I think sometimes it's exhausting, but it also gives me energy, right? Just like you said with the cold plunge. The other thing that I think is one of like my hidden like superhero like is I'm very curious and I like to read a lot. So like I think that gives me more strategic advantage than almost anything. And so like I have this saying like I may not be the smartest guy in the room, but I can work hard to be the most informed. And so like I think if I can outread you and out educate myself and do those things, that's huge alpha, that's huge upside. And so I've always been a big reader. Now, you know, a little bit of my story. So I never graduated a regular high school. I never graduated undergrad or did any of that stuff. Eventually, you know, I did a master's at London School of Economics, the first guy accepted without the prerequisites, and then went to MIT and got my MBA, first formally crushed. So I ended up getting
Goodwill Hunting in the building.
yeah, I ended up getting the academic stuff later, but I think like I always was just very curious. And I think like the more you know, it allows you to see the world differently. And like we talked, like, hey, we fought tigers and shit. There's a book that a mentor shared. It says when the world was lit by fire. And I always bring it up because up until the year, like, I think it was like 1600 or something, like the odds of dying a violent death were like over 90%. Like there was like a 90% chance that like you would get beat to death. Right. And it's like, that's fucking nuts. Do you know what I mean? And like,
I don't like
people
my
would never,
odds.
I don't like my odds either. You know what I'm saying? Like, I'm probably one of the 90. You know what I mean? I talk too much shit, you know? Someone gonna get me. And I think that it kind of puts things in context. And so a lot of times I kind of just step back and I try to think like, hey man, like, you know, things could be a lot worse. And I'm not like one of those things where I'm like a toxic optimist, but I also like, you know, I think like the problem is people think there shouldn't be problems. Like, hey man, some days are gonna suck. Like sometimes life is gonna be super hard. You just gotta like do your best not to make it even harder.
And be real. I think when you acknowledge truth, everyone just takes a deep breath. You know, I admire this entrepreneur named Sam Parr. He's got a podcast, My First Million and Money Wise.
Yeah.
He started a company called The Hustle and sold it to HubSpot. Really interesting guy. He was talking about his revenue targets. And he was like, I want to be doing $100 million in revenue in 5 years. And I think most entrepreneurs would be like, oh, this is how I got to that $100 million. And they'd have this like very specific kind of bullshit answer. And he's like, honestly, kind of a made up number that I liked. And I was like, I appreciate the authenticity in that. Like, just be real, you know?
Yeah, but I think that goes to it. I think most people are kind of just winging it, and I think that goes across the board. And yeah, I think you just gotta have big dreams. The thing is you got to do the work to achieve them. And again, think about like objectively, where can you find advantage?
Mhm.
You know what I mean? Like if I play 100 one-on-one versus LeBron. Like the reality is I'm probably gonna lose 100
Yo, I want to
times.
be there for that. Let me get
I'm just
courtside.
saying, right? Like he's objectively better than me. And so I look at like reading like that, like, okay, well, I can outread this motherfucker. You know what I'm saying? Like, all right, let's do that. Like I think like
Didn't
if
you read like
actually
400,000 pages in jail or something
yeah,
crazy
yeah.
like
So
that?
when I was in prison and I was like, at this time, I was like, I knew I would get out at this type of window or something. I did the math and I was like, okay, I only need to read 400,000 pages before I get out. And so, like, that was my thing. I would try to read those pages, and that was like my challenge to myself. So I'd look like, oh, I only got 200,000 more pages. I only got 100,000 more pages. And like, that's kind of how I counted to kind of make it a challenge against myself. And I still now I read all the time. You know what I mean? Like I still now because I think it's like how you update software. It's like that's your software of your brain,
Mm-hmm.
right? And I think like long form, well thought things are so powerful,
Mm-hmm.
right? Like I could read something. You have these like the greatest minds ever spent like 30 years with this research, and like I can get the cliff notes on that in like 3 or 4 days. Like, and that thing I think is just immensely, immensely, immensely powerful.
Amen. I don't want to spend too much time on maybe the dark past of Daniel Dark because I think
Okay.
you're just doing so many inspiring, awesome things that we could
Yeah.
spend our time talking about. It's more advantageous. But what was prison like?
Overall, like it's weird. So I have a bunch of complex thoughts, and I would never want to go back to prison. And I don't want you to go to prison. I think the world might be a little bit better if everyone went to prison sometimes because
Why?
there's accountability sometimes. Like if you're acting like an ass, like the accountability's swift. And like sometimes when I'm walking the streets, how people act, I'm like, man, don't act like that.
I had an
know?
encounter this morning. It's pretty
Yeah,
funny.
but I just think, and I'm not saying like that, but there was thing I remember when I was in county getting ready to go upstate. There was this older dude, and I was like, man, what's prison like and stuff? And he's like, man, it's weird. And he goes, because it's gonna suck, but also you're gonna have some of the best times of your life there. And and that's true. Like I would never want to go back, but I think that it shaped me into a better person in the long run. And there was times where like I laughed so hard, man, that like I couldn't even breathe, that I started choking. Um, and again, I'm looking at it in a different way. Do I ever want to go back? Do I think that it's a just system? Absolutely. Absolutely not. I think the key is how do you kind of let go of the bad stuff as life goes on so it doesn't become like an anchor or a drag? But yeah, prison.
What were you in for?
I was in for a carjack kidnap. It's a real crime. Yeah.
You want to share more on that?
Shit, I mean, I could. I'm pretty open book. But yeah, I mean, a carjack kidnap realistically is you take a car with a person in it. Mine was not that. I had gotten into an argument and a dispute with a woman that I was dating, and we were driving, and I didn't stop the car within 1,000 feet. And so it was a technicality. And then because I was gang affiliated growing up, it just kind of got over this thing. And initially they offered me 180 years. They wanted me to take it. And I fought it for years. Eventually got sentenced and was going to do about 6-7 years, and then it went back on an appeal, and it got overturned on appeal. And so I got out after about a little over 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah,
Dude, so many people with that start in life, like you said, you're gang affiliated, right? Then you get these obviously
Yeah.
very heavy charges.
Crazy as fuck. I gotta say, like I remember thinking, like, damn man, I'm fucking getting football numbers. Like we would always say football numbers, like 80 years or something, because like a receiver's jersey. I'm like, yeah.
Oh, you're up there.
Yeah, football
up there.
numbers.
No, I hate that.
But
so many people can't overcome that, right? So like what separated Daniel Dart from the rest of those convicts who are not out raising tens of millions of dollars? Like you're doing venture capital and investing at a very high level.
I'll tell you what, man, like there was multiple times when I was in prison that I truly didn't know if I would ever bounce back, man. I remember thinking like my life is fucking over.
How old were you?
Man, I got out 9 years ago, man.
Wait, you've done all this in 9 years?
Yeah.
Oh,
yeah.
Gosh,
Yeah,
man is on
yeah.
the move.
First job out for the first 6-7 months, I just changed sheets. I was a maid. You know what I mean? And that was my job, man. I had to come clean the room and do my things. I had to pay the bills.
I bet you were real good at it.
Yeah, man. I lived in this halfway house with 16 other dudes. And I remember like the first week in the halfway house, this back when I smoked cigarettes, I like wake up. It's like probably like 5 a.m. I'm still on that like prison clock time. And I step outside with my buddy Richard, and we're smoking a cigarette. And I swear to God, man, it's fucking crazy. And I see a motherfucker with a big ass gun pop out, and it's a marshal, and he just gives me a look. And I'm like, got my cigarette, and they came through the bushes in the house, and they're like, who's inside that door? I'm like, I don't know, bro. I came out that door. Like, I don't know what's happening. Because they was coming to get somebody in the house. But I was like, and I'm sitting looking at my boy Richard, like, the fuck? You know?
SWAT raid.
And so we got like 8 motherfuckers. It wasn't even SWAT, it was the marshals, man. They were on a fugitive. It was a dude from Alaska. And he was under a fake name or some shit. And I remember just thinking like, but the weird thing about it is like we didn't even miss a beat. So we were like just chilling and smoking a cigarette. Then they go get this motherfucker. We're like, good luck, homie, you know? And but it was like weird because that shit becomes so, it's so normal, but like that's not normal, you know? And then I think like the thing when I really kind of wanted to shift is I you know, I'd always been a big reader. I felt like, hey, I had some opportunity. But I think like when I was young, I understood the power of peer affiliation, right? So like, you know, if you look at it from a ganglands, like 2 people is stronger than 1, 3 people is stronger than 2. Like all things created equal, if we're both equal, 3 is going to be 2. And I understood that at a very deep level. So then I kind of just flipped it. I said, okay, man, like I just want to be around the best, awesomest, dopest people I can find. And so like I kind of became what I would say is just like a magnet that I stuck to like mentors and people I looked up to and all of those things. And I did the same thing. And I call it my water cooler theory. Like, where's the water cooler these people are hanging around?
Mhm.
And like, how do I get there? And then also like the power of no. So like a lot of people I had grown up with that are like, I'm like, yo, man, I can't fuck with you no more. Like, if you want to come to like an AA meeting with me, or you want to come like, you know, pass out food on Skid Row, or you want to do something like that, like meet me there, and we'll do it. But I think the power of peer affiliation, like you are who you surround yourself with. Like you really need to be very, very, very selective. And so now, as I've gotten older, if I see someone and I really admire them and look up to them, I'm like, yo, man, like teach me, shape me, like I want to learn from you, like I want to follow in your footsteps. And I think that was always just the goal, and it still is. Like I want to be a good person, I want to help people, I want to add value, and I want to hang around with people that I really admire, respect, and look up to. And so I think that, especially like looking at it from a criminal justice lens, I think there's a big shift because now more people are finding success. I think there's been a shift just in culture and society where more opportunities are opening up through different political activism and those things than ever existed in the 90s or 80s, or those things, you know?
Who are some of those people that you look up to the most that you've kind of gotten to know through your journey, and whether it's investors or
Oh man.
mentors? I'm sure there's a lot, right? It's a hard
I
question.
mean, there's some that I look up to. There's a guy named John Arnold who was a hedge fund guy, and now he runs a really big foundation, and I just admire and look up to him a ton.
Why?
Um, I just think that one, he's just super, super, super bright and works really hard to be well informed. Okay. And that is something I aspire to. He also is a great family man, right? You know, he's married, got kids, they get along, they go on vacations. And so I look up to and admire that a lot. Another person that I look up to and admire a lot is a guy named Josh Friedman, who's a hedge fund guy. Same thing, like the thing I always say, like I want to build Rock Air Ventures in a similar vein as Canyon Partners. His fund is like people go to Canyon and they build careers, right? And like I want to figure out how to build a firm where people look at it and say, hey, I want to go build my career there, right? And the same thing with Josh. Like one, he's super, super kind, and he always gives me his time and his insight. And this is a guy that's like uber successful, right? And just the kindness and the thoughtfulness and how both John and Josh act, I think is amazing. and I think with Josh, like he still gets along with all his kids and all of those things. And I think like that's what I aspire to be eventually. I want to build a family, but I also want to be someone that understands the value of things outside of work. Right. And so a lot of times when I look at like my mentors and those things, I'm asking questions about business, but I'm asking questions about life. And I think, you know, building companies where people want to build a career, that's not a business decision, that's a culture decision. Like, do people want to come and be part of that culture for 10, 20, 30 years? And so that's something that I've been very, very blessed. And there's a ton of other people. Our mutual friend Jim Bethay, right? Like I admire the heck out of that dude, and I feel like I always get good, honest insight. And so I think like those are the people that I want to surround myself with, right? And so it's like the minute I get an opportunity to be their friend, I'm like, yo, man, we're gonna be best friends. Like we hanging. And
Bear hug them. Don't let
yeah,
go.
but really, and I think the one thing like growing up and having maybe some rough and tumble life is like you really, really learn and value friendship. And so I think there's an immense amount of loyalty and appreciation I have for those mentors, right? Like in very real terms, like I have their back, man. Like I'm here to help you. And like if there's ever anything I can do to repay the kindness you've shown me, like just say the word, man. Like how can I be helpful? And I think there's like that old saying is like the better your friends are, um, it's almost like they don't need your help. They just need your friendship, right? Like I think I got to know recently um the CEO and founder of Industrious, the co-working space, right? And his wife used to work on a prison nonprofit. It was super cool, and him and I were vibing, and so initially I was like talking. I was like, initially I got to know him by seeing if there was any discounts available at Industrious, and then we ended up becoming friends. And I'm like, well, shit, man, now I can't ask for a discount. And he was like, what? I'm like, because you're my friend, man, I got to support you. And so I work at an Industrious, and we rent office space there
In Austin, Texas?
in Austin, Texas. Yeah, yeah. And I
That's where you're
love it,
based.
right? Because like I want to see that dude. I want to see him win, man. Right? Like I want to see my friends win. I want to see you win. And to be honest, man, I feel like people that even like I don't like sometimes, like I also kind of want to see them win. Like
Kindness is cool, man.
I'm
Kindness
not
is
going
the
to get
coolest thing in
rich
the world.
making someone else poor. There was another friend that once said, I think he's like, if you want to get rich, find out how to make other people rich. And I was like, wow, that's super powerful.
I love that.
Right. And I was like, okay, like that makes a lot of sense. And I think it kind of like it's that, hey, if you want to help yourself, figure out how to help other people.
Mhm. You went from convict to MIT graduate.
Yeah.
How in the world did you get into MIT?
Fuck,
Talking
man.
to you, I can see why, right?
Yeah.
But like at the time, I'm curious how that happened.
It's weird. That was a journey. I think even MIT, I think sometimes like they just didn't know what to do with me, because like sometimes once I was there, I feel like I was a bull in a china shop, you know. Um, One, I think big shout out to the admissions group and those things for kind of giving me the shot. I think how'd I get there? Fuck, I don't know. I mean, I feel like I would say like really a lot of hard work, dedication, perseverance, all those things. Um, but I think the bigger thing actually is I went to London School of Economics first, which is when I think of like social sciences and those things and economics, I think LSE is probably a better university. It's smaller, it's not as well known, but in the world of like econ and social science, it's maybe the best in the world. And with that, um, I think that was really like a very, very pivotal moment because I ended up going there and doing two masters. And I think that validation allowed the opportunity for something like MIT. Um, and so with that, the process initially, I was like, hey, I'm gonna try and like do this master's. I talked to some friends, I got some great recommendations from mentors. I'm going and I'm like trying to figure out how to get through this prereqs thing. And there was just no love. First they were like, well, you got to get someone from the head of a department to approve it. And so I asked like every head of department, and literally everyone was like, no, 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 no. And I remember being like super nice, being like, well, thank you for your time. Hopefully I'll figure it out. But I was fucking pissed, man. Like deep down, I was kind of like, fuck these motherfuckers, you know. But the goal was always to get in. So I was like, hey man, I need to just kill them with kindness because I'm hoping someday soon these will be my colleagues. But I was like, you know, if it powered the drive. And so I ended up writing this really long letter to, at the time, like the head of admissions and the dean. And because I had been told that I had to go meet with the board of regents and they had to be like a board thing. So I write this long letter. Hey,
Jeez.
yeah, like it was not easy. And I say, hey, I know that I need to meet with the board of regents. Like, I don't want to cause problems. Like, how do I get on the docket? Like, is there like a submission process? Like, I don't even know where they meet. Like, how can I sit down and talk to these guys? Like a town hall or something. And I said, the world has significantly changed, right? Like when I got my first felony, like my option was, you know, line cook or construction guy. The world has radically changed. Now you don't need a college diploma to work at Goldman Sachs or Google, which are two of the biggest companies in different fields. Um, you know, I think there's an obligation that schools have, universities, because they have so much power, right? Like that stamp of approval can radically change someone's life. And I feel like, hey, I've done this stuff. And at that time, I'd already presented academic level literature at academic conferences around the world. I've been featured at World Economic Forum and their publications, written for Harvard Business Review. So I'd had a lot of very academic type success. And so I said, I just want to meet with the board and like plead my case. And the next day I got a letter back and she said, hey, actually, I have the ability to just single-handedly prove you. So,
Decision maker.
yeah, like I would, and she goes, I agree. I agree with everything you're saying. Like the world has changed and London School of Economics needs to change with it. We would be honored for you to apply and have it be a first. And I get goosebumps telling the story because it was just like, it was fucking nuts. And so I apply, and within 24 hours, you know, I get an unconditional acceptance. And she said, she ended up writing me a letter. She said, hey, you know, I don't want to put pressure on you, but please do well because people
You've got a target on your back.
will be watching you. And so I feel like I did well. Not only did I do one master's, I ended up doing two masters simultaneously and doing a bunch of lectures and stuff like that. And so it worked out, and I just enjoyed it so much that you know, when the opportunity and the next thing to go to MIT, I was like, yo, I gotta jump at it.
Dude, congratulations, brother.
Yeah,
You
thanks,
fought that
man.
uphill battle.
Thanks.
It's really impressive.
It's pretty. It's sometimes when I think back, I'm just like, yo, it's like sometimes it's better to be dumb than smart. You know what I'm saying? Because like
Ignorance
you
is bliss
don't.
kind of thing.
Yeah, I think a lot of times when you're only looking again, it's like you have an image in the rule book from what you were told. But like my whole life has been non-traditional. So it's like sometimes when like raising a fund's hard, it's like, yo, nothing I've done has been easy. Like it's always been like, yo, I gotta break through walls, I gotta crawl in windows, I gotta like going through the air duct. And so I think a lot of those things, like, yo, like I'm gonna ask. And I think we had kind of talked about pivotal things in life, and I had mentioned yesterday being homeless. And so I was homeless for really a few years, and not homeless like sleeping on someone's couch, right? But like homeless, like I was literally at 18, one of those kids you would see that slept on the streets, that had their skateboard, that would shower like every month and a half, that like, you know, like homeless, like getting food at churches, begging for money. And I think the one thing that did is it allowed me to disconnect from my ego and how people perceived me. Because like if you did not ask for help, you would starve. You know what I mean? And so I think that ability to disconnect and allow things where like, yeah, maybe you're gonna see me as stupid, or maybe you're gonna see me as dumb, or maybe I'm not gonna be part of your cool kids crew. Like, okay, then like guess what? We probably wouldn't have been friends anyways. You know what I'm saying? And like, you know, find the believers, don't convince the skeptics. Like, there's enough people out there that are willing to give you a chance. Do you know what I mean? And like that's what I'm saying. Like when I mention names like John Arnold or Josh Friedman or like Jim Bethea, like these people that openly, willingly give me their time and their knowledge, like I always say, like I don't need a million people to like me. One person can radically change my life, you know? And so I think that kind of lesson I'm so grateful for. And then even like prison, like what I learned is like we're not made of glass, like we're not gonna break. Do you know what I mean? And so I think about it as like, and I've said this a lot, like people are like, oh, you're a risk taker. Like, I don't think so. Like to me, a risk is like being in a plane, throwing out a fucking parachute, be like, catch that motherfucker, put it on. Like that's a risk. Like shit where like it's gonna hurt my ego and I have to start over. Like that's not a risk. Like that shit gonna happen anyways. Like you could work at fucking Facebook and get laid off. Like that's just life. Inherently bad shit happens. So I don't think that's a risk. That's part of life.
Do you have any mental, like, kind of things you've learned for handling adversity when it strikes?
Um,
Like, where does your mind
when
go?
you're tired, just rest, don't quit. I think there's that saying, like people overestimate what they can do in 1 year and underestimate what they can do in 10. And so we had spoken about it a little bit earlier, like, hey, where do you really want to be? Where do you really want to be? And I think have that honest conversation. Um, I think when I got to finance, like my first thing is like I just wanted to be part of, I just wanted to be involved. Like I just wanted to work in venture capital. Like when I first got into it, like anywhere, like man, I just want to be part of this community. Like that was like my goal. And now, I'm involved in all these different things and people like I was at the Milken Institute Global Forum and one of my friends, he's like, man, you're always the happiest person to be here. I'm like, 'cause this is fucking awesome. Right. And I think there's another one I go to every year in Miami. It's like the biggest kind of like finance conference in the world. It's called Global Alts, put on by a group called iConnections. And I'm always like, man, it's just, and in the past, like before I even had fun, I would just have a guest pass the founder would give me, and I would just like hang out. And I was always so smiley. And then, man, you just love it. I'm like, cause yo, this is literally like the most successful finance people, like really like in the history of the world are like here. Like just the fact that I'm here is like fucking like
It's
crazy and just
insane.
so cool.
You have a reputation for being, I think, quite like optimistic, right, and upbeat.
I think so.
What gets you down?
Yeah. I think bullies probably really bother me a lot. Like sometimes when I see like the bullies and you see them now, political stuff,
Sad.
like they just punch down. I think that really bums me out. But I think I got it from my mom and my dad. I think they're both like the greatest thing I think I got from my dad is like if you work hard and you set your mind to something, like you could achieve it. Like I think like he had me believe really that like if I wanted to be an astronaut, I could. Now I don't know, I never wanted to be an astronaut, but like he instilled that kind of ethos. Um and then my mom like and man, I feel like she's probably told me this more than anything in my entire life is this too shall pass. Right? And so I think those things, like you hear them enough, like they just kind of be ingrained. And I also like it comes back to like amplifiers, right? Like one person, one moment, one opportunity can radically change your life, both for good or bad. So like you need to be careful on the bad side too, right? But on the good side, like you know, don't leave 5 minutes before the miracle happens. Right. Like now, like I do have the fund and it's like I'm like blown away. I'm like, this shit's awesome. Like I met with one potential investor at this big university endowment and they passed, right? And they were like, hey, we can't invest right now, maybe in the future. But I was like happy as a motherfucker. And they're like, you pretty happy? I'm like, because I can't believe I'm in this fucking room pitching you right now.
I'm curious, with such an untraditional background and path, how do you build trust with these investors and entrepreneurs?
Dude, that's a good question. I think slowly and over time, humans like when we talk about AI, right? Like AI is never going to replace humans in art because humans are irrational, right? Like think about like a resentment you have on somebody from like 6th grade, right? Like you think a computer's going to hold on to that shit? That shit don't serve you at all. You know what I mean?
Gone.
And what I think is it's not so much the people care that you make mistakes. It's I think when you make mistakes, you don't learn from them, or you try to deny that it was a mistake or place blame. Right. So like I'll be the first one to say, hey, I may not be for everybody, and some people may never forgive me. I have absolutely no control over that. But a lot of other people I can say, hey man, yeah, I did make a lot of really poor decisions. And when I actually think about it honestly, like I was fucking young, man. I was immature. I didn't have the wisdom. There was just things I didn't understand at 25 that now I understand. And I think that that's a through line. And I think there's a lot of other people that, but for the grace of God, could have been in a very similar situation. So I think the thing about it is, you know, hey, well, what have you done since then? What is this? Let me look at this. Let me look into that. And some people could get there and some people can't. What I think is in America, man, like America, we lock people up, you know, and traditionally that's people without resources. Now the landscape has shifted so much that there's these huge groups of people that I think are a huge opportunity set. Like I think now, like when you think of disparate communities, or overlooked communities, like I also think that's like an economic opportunity, right? Because it's no longer like 1%. It's like 20%, 40%. Like that's a lot of people. And so I think that yeah, I don't know how I build, it just takes time,
That's good
you know?
advice. Yep.
Yeah.
Patience
Patience. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I
and
think
intention,
again,
right? It's probably like intention plus patience equals the
patience,
results.
intention. But I think, man, it's like you never know. Like what I would say is like you got to create opportunities for God to work. And so I always tell people, I'm like, yo, man, get out there, get out there. And I was talking to like one of my friends, I think from Ethiopia or something. He was like talking, and I was like, well, how do you quantify that? Like, what would that be? And I'm like, well, what I think is like, I was like, over the next year, you're gonna find yourself in a position where you're pitching somebody or something you don't think you have any relation to, and they might be like, oh, you're from Ethiopia? Like, man, in college, I live right next door to an Ethiopian restaurant, and I would go there 3 times a week.
Mhm.
And all of a sudden you have this commonality and you're like, wow. And to me, like, that's how God works. And so it's like, I'll end up pitching this big university endowment or something. Like, I was pitching a massive university, and their head of investments was like, man, I used to teach in a prison when I was in college. I said, what? And like, next thing you know, we talk about that. And for me, I'm like, I try to hold the flag up high because like if that's gonna be a problem for you, I'd rather know it right away so I don't waste my time. And then I launched a program um to teach entrepreneurship and financial literacy in prisons and jails to men and women in Massachusetts who are incarcerated. And it's amazing how many different finance people. I'm like, yo, you want to come and like come to a class? And they're like, yeah. Like, I think the thing about it is a lot of times people want to engage or help, but they just don't have any entry point. Right. And so a lot of times, like, I think there's a lot of curiosity around it. And I think that to me, like the idea of America, right? Like I love America a lot. Is it perfect? No. It's like a crazy little kid that you just love that fucks up a lot. But the idea of America to me is similar to the idea of venture capital. Like we can build something from nothing, right? And so like to me the idea of America, the America that I want to build, the America that I want is like where you were born and where you come from does not determine where you end. And I think venture gives the best opportunity for that. And also you can make a ton of money. I think America gives the best opportunity for that. Does it mean it's perfect? Absolutely not. Right. But I think by and large, hopefully I have enough agency to change some of it, at least within my little orbit.
Well said. Let's end with an exercise.
Okay, what's the exercise?
You down? We're going to do a 60-second brag. I'm giving you the floor for 60 seconds.
Okay.
And you just have to list off the things that you're most proud of accomplishing. Say you've got great grandkids someday that never get the opportunity to meet you. What would you want them to know that you loved and were proud to do in your life?
Yeah.
Let me get my timer going. Are you ready, Daniel Dart?
I'm ready.
60 seconds on the clock. You're rolling.
So I have a friend named Raymond who was serving life in prison. I met him when I was in prison. He was there and he had been there about 30 years. And we had become good friends. And he was a really wise dude. And I told him, I said, man, I'm going to get out of prison and I'm going to make some money. I'm going to help you get a private attorney for when you go back to board. And I said that to a few different guys. I'm using Raymond as the main example. And so about 2.5 years after, I ended up saving money, man. I didn't have any money, but I put like $2,000 to put money down to hire this guy named Keith Watley, who eventually
15 seconds left.
The first Obama. I was gonna go over because this
you
story
can't.
is just so good.
You can't, dude. You got
Why
60
can't
seconds.
I go over?
Because that's the exercise.
Bro, that's why I don't work out. You see me stand up? You know what I'm saying? But I'm super proud of this. I'm super proud of this. So that's why I told you LeBron would fuck me up.
God.
You know what I mean?
You had one job.
But that's why I'm saying. But, I ended up saving money to do that. And then I would check in and I helped. It took us 8 years, but we ended up getting him out on parole.
Whoa.
And I'm super proud of that because I was putting money aside for that even when I lived in a closet and I was making less than $1,500 a month. That just means a lot. And I speak to him every single day. I check in with him. He checks in with me. He just turned 65. When you can do things for people who may never be able to repay you, I think is the most great thing an individual could do. It's like that saying, like, the man who plants a tree who will never live to enjoy its shade.
Mm-hmm.
And so I'm super, super proud of that.
Man, I'm inspired by your kindness, your ability to overcome adversity, just all the impact that you're making and how big you're thinking.
And how poorly I am at the 60-second
You
exercise.
sucked at that.
That was bad, man.
You were so bad at that.
Yeah.
That was the worst I've ever seen.
Yeah.
But for you, I'm going to make an exception because I
Thank
love
you,
you,
man.
and that's
Thank
a
you.
damn good story and
Yeah.
a damn good impact. Brother, thank you for being you, and thank you for coming on, man.
Cheers.
Absolute pleasure, Daniel Dart.